Today on the Eurostep.
Curry smashes the record, and the CAVS.
Where's Wendell Carter going?
And we round up the latest news around the association. Hi, I'm Mushing Brown, and this is the Eurostep on CRC. Today I'm joined.
Are we gonna beat that?
I'm keeping
Today I'm joined by Killian Loftus.
Yeah.
Alex Evans.
Man, I just want to go Pokemon hunt tonight.
And special guest Peter Walsh.
Was that
Peter.
good enough?
That was a balls of an intro.
That
Okay.
was so bad. It was so good though.
We can get it in post. Come on.
And if you're still listening after that, I thank you very much. This is the Eurostep on CRC. We're going to be talking basketball for the next 45 minutes or so, and we're going to get right into it. Game 2 of the NBA Finals happened the night before last. It was quite the game, actually. Steph Curry went off for 33 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists with a record 9 threes, which is the most ever in one NBA Finals game, as well as KD adding 26. LeBron had, well, for LeBron, a measly 29 points. He also had 9 rebounds, 13 assists, and Kevin Love chipped in with a 22 and 10. So I'm going to start with you, Killian. What did you make of the game?
It's a scary performance for the Cavs. You know, they're down 2-0 now. It's not going to be an easy situation for them, especially against the Golden State Warriors. We've said it time and time again, when the Warriors play perfectly like they did, you just can't beat them. When they're shooting 57% from the field, 41% from three, they're an impossible team to beat. Everyone chipped in, and the performance for Golden State, you mentioned Curry, monster night with 33, 7 and 8, looking like he might get his first Finals MVP award this year. Durant had a great game as well, 26, 9 and 7. Klay Thompson did his thing with 20 points. Draymond Green had a bad game for what most people, casual fans, would think, with 5 points, 8 rebounds and 7 assists. He did his thing out there. You have to give props to JaVale McGee. He really showed up last night. In only 17 minutes, he had the 12 points and 2 rebounds. It's good stuff from JaVale McGee. For the Cavs, it's a blowout from the Warriors. You can't do anything against them when they're playing like they did last night. They had good performances from their guys. You talked about the LeBron near triple-double. Kevin Love had a good game. George Hill did a bit with 15 points, but you can't beat the Warriors when they're this good, when they play perfectly like that.
Yeah, and especially they really got that kick off the bench, which they really need. JaVale McGee, Sean Livingston and David West all shooting 100% from the field. Kind of just X factor off the bench. When you come in and you're such a good offense and bring your bench guys in, they can continue that production. JaVale McGee with 12, Livingston with 10, David West adding another 3 without not missing a shot. It's nice to be able to bank on that, because you can't really at the Warriors. Their depth isn't all there that some of the time. But I think after that Game 1 performance, the outcome of that game, I think the Cavs, they never really looked the same. They're kind of shook, I suppose. Like we saw going into the overtime period, they just weren't the same team as that Game 1 in regulation.
Yeah, Peter, is there anything more really that Cleveland can do if they're going to take a game from the Golden State?
I honestly don't see anything that Cleveland can do, to be honest. Because you can't rely on LeBron James to solely carry this team through what seems to be probably the greatest Warriors team that has ever played. Not only the greatest Warriors team that has ever played, but probably the greatest team in NBA history, if you want to.
Yeah, I definitely say so. We said it time and time again. The Cleveland team just isn't good enough. The only chance they have at stealing a game from these Warriors is if the Warriors have an off night, don't show up, and Cleveland have to capitalise on that and steal the game away from them.
Or if the refs have an off night and actually officiate it fair.
Oh.
25 to 15 fouls for the Golden State. We're not going to say it would affect the game. And I said it before, I'm never one to kind of go off about the refs, but there was a lot of questionable calls there. Game 2, it's not going to affect the result, especially when Steph Curry has 9 for 17 from downtown. It's just ridiculous numbers. Just goes to show the Chicago Bulls in 1991, in the whole of that finals, they went 5 for 21 from the 3-point line. So it just kind of puts that into perspective over the last number of years. But Game 1 really could have been affected by the referees, I think. Down the stretch, a lot of questionable calls, and you're looking forward. I don't know. It's just...
Is it a question, though, are the refs biased towards the Golden State Warriors, or are they just bad?
I'm not the biggest fan of people, blaming performances on the refs, but, we've seen it a lot in recent years that superstars seem to get special treatment from the refs. We've seen it specifically this year. You could see it a bit with Donovan Mitchell. He got a lot of calls recently, and even Jason Tatum towards the end of the playoffs. The start of the playoffs, he wasn't getting anything at the rim. Then he started shooting 10 free throws a game against the Cavs. It's that superstar treatment. And when you have 4 superstars, 5 Hall of Famers with the Warriors, you're going to get a lot more calls than a team like the Cleveland Cavaliers, who only have that one guy who's going to get that superstar treatment from the refs. So, I just don't like blaming performances on the refs, but if there comes a point where it is definitely a factor in winning and losing games, especially in Game 1 when, obviously it went to overtime. A couple of calls a different way, it could have definitely been a Cleveland win.
Going back to Game 1, I'm sure nearly everyone has seen the video now of LeBron James's reaction after he found out that Cleveland had a timeout left at the end of regulation. Just if you didn't see it, basically someone tells LeBron James, you did have a timeout. LeBron then proceeds to put his head in his hands and
weep.
Yeah. What was startling though is that you could see how defeated the Cleveland Cavaliers were. Not a word was said between the players in that overtime period, or the period between regulation and overtime after that. Could you fault maybe LeBron James for not leading his team and provoking them to play better rather than just sitting there in regret over what could have been? Anyone?
It's a tough one to kind of, because at that point, LeBron James, looking back in hindsight, obviously you're going to say, oh, he can do this, this and this. But when he's going up against arguably the best team of all time, as we said before, and in that moment, when your teammate, all you have to do was throw up a little floater from 5 feet away to presumably win Game 1 of the NBA Finals and put you in great position to win this one, you've just got to feel for them. Like, he is human. A lot of people saying, is he a robot or whatever? Is he half Terminator? But that's just absolutely heartbreaking, because he knows going into overtime that the Warriors are a far better team. And yes, there is more he could have done, but as a person looking back, that's your natural reaction is to just sit there and think about it.
Only
just
Nice.
Just think about the position you've put yourself in, LeBron. You should have never left Miami.
Only 4 teams in the history of the NBA Finals have come back from 2-0. That's actually kind of surprising. Only 2 games. A lot of teams can do that in the regular playoffs. But when it gets to the finals, it's something entirely different. But one of those teams was LeBron James's. And
I saw a stat there last day. The series overall, when teams are down 2-0, overall of all playoff basketball in the modern era, teams are 17 and 230 something. LeBron James teams are 3-4. So it goes to show about LeBron's mentality about coming back and never giving up.
But Peter, do you think there is any way Cleveland can come back and win this series?
I honestly do not see anything, because you might look at the Warriors as out and out offensive powerhouse, and they probably are. They have all-star capacity players. They do have all-star players in Draymond Green and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, but
get off Snapchat, man.
Your phone went off a minute ago.
But even after taking into account with the fouls, the Warriors had 8 blocks as a team, and those all came from their 3 starters: JaVale McGee, Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green. And to be honest, you can't really do much about a team like that that's producing at 57%. Was it 57% the field goal percentage?
57.
57% field goal percentage, and then to be able to protect the interior like that is just completely unheard of. I don't see any way out for LeBron James at this point.
What would be a realistic expectation of this Cleveland Cavaliers? Is it too much to ask of them to take a game, Killian?
It's definitely possible. We've seen Golden State are a pretty inconsistent team. That's their main kind of Achilles heel, I suppose you call it. It can be inconsistent. One night they could destroy a team by 40, the next they look like a completely different team. They have, like Cleveland, they have to rely on a bad performance in Golden State, and when you have to rely on that, you're really going nowhere. I don't think they'll steal the game from the Warriors, but this is LeBron James we're talking about. He's a bit of an animal.
We saw it a lot, especially in the Houston series. Houston got a lot of praise for going up against the Warriors, but the reality of it was that the Warriors weren't the Warriors for many parts of that series. Obviously, Game 7, the second half, the third quarter mainly, they kind of got back to where they were. But the Cavs just really aren't a worthy opponent at all. I said it time and time again during the conference finals that this is the real finals. Whoever, the Rockets or the Warriors, is probably going to win, and I think that's coming to fruition now.
Well, that's about everything from the NBA Finals for the moment. The next game will be on Wednesday night, which is technically Thursday morning here. It'll be 2 a.m. our time. But that is one of 3 games, if it goes that far, that'll be played in Cleveland before, obviously, the potential return to the Oracle. Moving on, lots has been going on around the association over the past few days. So we'll start with the Detroit Pistons. They are looking for a new coach after they fired which Van Gundy?
Is it Stan?
I don't know. The better Van Gundy, Jeff.
Jan.
Right.
John Van Gundy.
Stan Van Gundy, because Jeff Van Gundy,
Legendary commentator.
Yeah. Some of the lines, including, what can you do with your second cousin? What is a second cousin?
Semi-O-jelly? Don't you mean full O-jelly?
Have you ever heard where it was like, if I was a player, I would bring a razor out on the court with me to get the free timeout when I cut myself? I kid you not, that is actually.
Okay, so anyway, Detroit fired Stan Van Gundy and they're looking for a new coach. We've talked about it in previous episodes that they were looking at Dwayne Casey among others, but they've narrowed their short list seemingly down to 2, which is again Dwayne Casey and Michigan's Tony Belaine, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Michigan's
Coach Tony B.
Tony B.
Coach B.
Tony B.
Whichever coach takes the job, where can Detroit hope to be next season realistically?
I think realistically kind of battling for that 7-8 spot. They acquired Blake Griffin midway through the year to kind of push on their playoff push. Didn't do a whole lot. They kind of were in no man's land there for a while, not being able to move up and not being able to move down. But I think if they have a full season under their belt, with obviously we've seen the videos of Andre Drummond working out this summer and him actually having a jump shot,
shooting step back threes.
But even if he can shoot a mid-range shot, you're happy. You can pair him up with Blake Griffin, no bother. And I think if they did get a new coach, which I think is badly needed, I think Dwayne Casey would be a good fit there. Get them playing team ball, because a lot of their offense kind of just run through Blake Griffin in the post and kind of run something, because they don't have a lot outside of that. If they can add a few pieces in free agency and get a good kind of team mentality going in Detroit, they could be on for a pretty good playoff team. And with the superstars they have, one of the better front courts in the league, especially with Stanley Johnson, a defensive wing who's on the rise now, coming into his 4th season. That's a scary front court, especially with Blake and Andre Drummond.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a high likelihood that a playoff spot will open up in the East. If LeBron James leaves the Cavaliers, they're not going to be making the playoffs, even contesting for it. And this year, we talked about it previously as well, the only team aside from Detroit that was kind of competing for the playoffs was the Charlotte Hornets. And come on, let's be realistic now. They're not going anywhere near the playoffs this year. So the Pistons will be in prime position to take that position from the Cavs. They'll be in the lower seeds. I hope they can prove me wrong, but I doubt it. 7, 8 seed, that kind of thing. I'd love to see if they could, whoever becomes the coach, Dwayne Casey or Tony B, if they could give Blake Griffin more of a ball handling role. I think he'd be perfectly suited for that kind of position for a team. We saw it, I think, 3 years ago in the first round of the playoffs when Chris Paul went down injured. Blake Griffin took up the point guard spot and he was averaging triple doubles. It was an amazing sight to see. I'd love to see that with whoever the new Detroit Pistons coach is in a few months' time.
Obviously, one of the biggest problems with that team is Blake Griffin, not because of his playing ability, but because how prone to injuries he is, and we've talked about it in the previous episode. But if he can stay fit, surely you'd fancy Detroit to make the playoffs.
Definitely, like there's no other competition.
Depending on what happens with the off season, because the 8 teams that made the playoffs this year in the East, the majority of them, maybe the only Cavaliers, the only one that I might think may fall out. Aside from that, the rest of the teams are pretty set and are pretty content on moving up and trying to get better. So it's not going to be an easy task for the Pistons. They'll have to be in some sort of battle, but it is looking good for them.
And of course, they don't have their pick, so there's nothing they can do this year really in the draft to improve their team. They traded away that pick in the deal for Blake Griffin. But moving on, another former Clipper, Chris Paul, CP3, apparently, according to Woj, will not accept anything less than a max contract. Which obviously, if that's to be given to him at Houston, would more or less end their chances of signing LeBron James, unless LeBron James takes a pay cut, and that's not going to happen. So I'll start with you, Peter. Do you think it's worth it for the Houston Rockets to give Chris Paul a max contract?
I do think it's actually worth it for the Houston Rockets because they've got decent set pieces around Harden and Chris Paul at the moment, and if they can hold on to them two, then that really does open things up to the future. I think they will be able to contend next year, but I wouldn't rank them as high as you've seen maybe the odds for taking the championship, as we've already seen.
I mean, we saw how close they were this year. Obviously taking the Golden State Warriors to 7 games and being in good position for the majority of that game. With Chris Paul's absence, with him being injured and just shooting absurdly bad from 3, they only lost to arguably the greatest team of all time by 10 points. So if you can re-sign Chris Paul, try and retool, do anything that's possible, sign some vets, because Houston is an intriguing place. If you're a ring chaser, I suppose, why wouldn't you want to go to Houston, try and improve that team and overthrow the Warriors? So I don't see why they wouldn't sign Chris Paul and try and go again. The core they have, we've seen how well it worked this year, obviously claiming the 1 seed and going deep into the playoffs. So I think that is your best bet if you're the Rockets. You can't rely on trying to get LeBron James. So resign Chris Paul and try and go again, because I don't see what more there is to do.
Yeah, and if you're Chris Paul, you're definitely going to be trying to get as much money as possible. You might think it's a bit uncharacteristic for an selfish guy like Chris Paul, but this could definitely be his last shot at a max contract. He's going up there in years. I think he's about 32. So, this will be his last shot at a max contract. Aside from that, it'll probably be vets minimums if he keeps on chasing a ring, maybe, if he can't do anything with the Rockets. So, he's trying to get that max deal, stretch until he's about 36, 37, and live the rest of his life a Hall of Famer.
But I don't know, if you're Chris Paul, he spent his whole life being unlucky. He made his first ever conference finals this year. I don't see why he wouldn't take a slight pay cut. You're not asking him to take 15 million or anything. If he takes even 28 or 20, something below the max anyways, and try and even get a few guys for 4 or 5 million that will really help the team, that'll fit the system, guys that can just shoot the 3 so they don't go over 27 in the conference finals game 7, then it will dramatically help the team. And I think if he really did want this ring, because he will end up being one of the greatest players to not have a ring if he doesn't win one. If he really wants to win one, I think it would be in his best options to take a slight pay cut.
Yeah, but you do have to consider from the Houston side, this is for a player who is getting older, a player who isn't, I suppose, at, well, not a LeBron James level of staying injury free, but he is somewhat prone to injuries, and you'd have to wonder, would it, even if they're not chasing LeBron James, I'm not entirely sure if they're going to give up maybe their chance for maybe future free agents for the next 2 or 3 seasons so they can get Chris Paul, who may not be at that level for more than one. No?
What do you say?
At the end of the day as well, I don't think they'd want to risk losing Chris Paul as well. He's been so valuable to them this year. They played absolutely amazing with him and James Harden on the floor. And if they're trying to give him a pay cut and he says no, he can just easily walk off, go somewhere else. It'll be Houston that's losing at the end of the day. It's at this point, it's kind of looking maybe it's LeBron or Chris Paul, and you don't want to be caught in the middle without either of them.
Moving on, apparently the Boston Celtics are very interested in Mo Bamba, to the point where they are considering trading for the Dallas Mavericks pick, which is 5th. There are reports saying that they will give up their first round pick and Jaylen Brown for the pick, but the Dallas Mavericks want Jason Tatum in return. And I can already see the pained smile on Killian's face, because I don't think anyone really would want to trade Jason Tatum for a pick. But
it's not happening.
It's not. No. Firstly, do you think that Mo Bamba would suit the Boston Celtics?
I think Mo Bamba is the kind of guy that suits every team in the NBA. He's shown his physical abilities with his 8-foot wingspan plus 7 foot. Already doesn't need to put on much more weight coming out of college. He's shown that he has some sort of an outside shot, starting to develop it even more. And if he can just continue that growth, he's at a level we kind of saw from Joel Embiid, I'd like to say, from his rookie year. And now Joel Embiid's only in the second year. We've seen he's established himself as one of, if not the best centre in the NBA. And Mo Bamba has kind of shown flashes of the same sort of abilities, but he hasn't even been drafted yet. So of course he's an exciting prospect, but he is unproven in the NBA, and Jaylen Brown is proven in the NBA. He's a guy that everyone wants. Mo Bamba is a guy that everyone wants, but so is Jaylen Brown. A kind of hybrid wing. He can defend. He's a good on the offensive side of the ball as well. He can do a little bit of everything. He's just a perfect team player and has that potential as well to be a star.
Yeah, definitely. If the Mavs are looking at Jason Tatum, that's a no. We saw last summer in the Kyrie Irving trade. Back then, Danny Ainge completely refused to trade Jason Tatum. Imagine what he's thinking now after the amazing playoffs he had, as well as his rookie year. That's not happening. If anything's going to be Jaylen Brown. But just like Alex said, I don't see why you trade what's looking like a future all-star for an unproven rookie who's, he's probably the rawest player in the top 10. That's why he's so touted. He's incredible potential. I hope this doesn't happen, but at the end of the day, you have to trust Danny Ainge as a Celtics fan.
We've seen time and time again.
People thought the Cavs won that Kyrie Irving trade. It's an absolute robbery nowadays, but
when they traded away Avery Bradley and everyone said who will get Kyrie in the playoffs,
hold my beer.
And then Danny hold my non-alcoholic beverage as Danny Ainge trades for Kyrie Irving. But we've seen the way that the Celtics are set up now. I don't think you get rid of Tatum or Brown unless you're calling New Orleans Pelicans or the San Antonio Spurs for either Kawhi Leonard or
even the
Timberwolves. Or Anthony
Davis. We can talk about
for Karl Anthony Towns maybe not going on well. But even then, I don't know if you go for that. You want an out-and-out star. But we've seen with Danny Ainge, you can't really doubt him anymore. It's if Danny Ainge wants Mo Bamba, then I suppose the Celtics are getting Mo Bamba. That's all.
Well, I don't know if I'd put it like that, but if the trade were to go through, I don't think anyone would begrudge Danny Ainge straight away, and not after what happened with the last trade. I know some people, they're a bit annoyed, not because of what Isaiah Thomas offered to the team on the court, but for what he did after his sister passed away. And I thought that was the only problem that people really had with the trade from the Boston side, because obviously you're getting Kyrie Irving, one of the best players in the league. You're not going to be complaining too much, and I think he has shown in the regular season. Obviously he got injured, so he didn't play in the playoffs. He's shown just how good he is, and look, they won that trade. I think the only piece, the only player that they have in Cleveland now is Ante Zizic. Is obviously they have the Brooklyn pick from that trade, but Cleveland lost that trade big time.
Yeah. On the Celtic side of things, I'd rather see a trade revolving around picks. If you take out Jaylen Brown, we obviously have our pick this year, 27th pick. We have the Kings pick next year, protected number 1. Grizzlies protected first round pick. Clippers protected first round pick. All for next year. So it would be a far better trade revolving around those, but I'm not sure if the Mavericks would take that, because
But
it's looking likely we won't get those Grizzlies and Clippers picks.
You've got to look at this from the Mavericks side as well. They have a top 5 pick in one of the most anticipated draft classes in a long time. People saying that this might be as good as some of the past ones, like 2003 LeBron James's era. It's so deep and there's so much talent. You can find a gem from anywhere. And when you're picking at number 5, some people have the likes of Luka Doncic falling to 5, which is a little bit ridiculous, but a lot of mock drafts have that, and I think they know a little bit more than we do about the draft. But there's so many guys, we've talked about them on the show, but guys like DeAndre Ayton, Wendell Carter, Marvin Bagley, Jaren Jackson, there's so many franchise-changing players in the draft that the Mavericks are right to look for a lot. And whether that is picks or Jaylen Brown, you've got to get something, because if you compare a nice guy at 5 to pair with Dennis Smith Jr., then you've got a nice core then going forward if you're the Mavs.
Okay, so finally in this news roundup, the opening odds for next year's championship came out the other day, and this is certainly interesting anyway. Obviously, the Golden State Warriors are favourites at 5-4. Following them, tied second, are the Houston Rockets and the Philadelphia 76ers at 7-2. Following them are the Boston Celtics at 8-1. The Lakers and Miami Heat are tied at 20-1. Then you have the Spurs at 25-1, the Cleveland Cavaliers at 30-1, the Toronto Raptors at 40-1, and the Utah Jazz at 60-1. So first impressions there, obviously the Warriors are the favourites, but it's certainly interesting to see the 76ers ranked above the Boston Celtics.
They'd have to make some moves this offseason to rank up that high, I'd say. JJ Redick is a free agent this year. He could well re-sign with the 76ers, but it's not guaranteed by any stretch of the measure, and he was absolutely brilliant for them all year long, especially in the playoffs. Being that stretch guy, he's the best shooter on the team, hands down, really good guy to pair alongside Ben Simmons in the backcourt with his struggling, his shooting woes, I suppose you call them. I don't understand how they could possibly be that high after just one good playoff run and a good regular season out of them. They're still such a young team, so inexperienced, that it's just too hard to rank them as the third favourite team for the NBA championship next year, especially considering they're ahead of the Boston Celtics, who were one game off the NBA Finals without 2 All-Stars and some decent role players. It's absolutely crazy to me.
Do you think it would be a fair indication, or fair to say that this indicates that the Lakers and the Heat are going to make some big moves with free agents this offseason?
Yeah, obviously we all know about the Lakers, and they're
getting everyone.
They're open, they're going after everyone. DeMarcus Cousins, Paul George, LeBron James. The Lakers want everyone, even trade talks with Kawhi Leonard. But Pat Riley also from the Miami Heat said he was going to be making some moves. And obviously the Heat, they're not the Lakers. They're not as kind of, we're going to get everyone like the Lakers are. But the Heat still want to make some moves. They're not really content with the team they have at the moment. They've got some young guys in Jay Rich, Tyler Johnson, Bam Adebayo, Justice Winslow. They do have some room there, as long with Whiteside as well, who's could be on the way out. There's some room there for maybe a potential trade with guys like Karl-Anthony Towns and Kawhi Leonard that maybe aren't happy in the situations they're in right now. If the Heat could snag one of them, then if you have even say Kawhi Leonard, a top 3 player in the NBA, you're always going to be in contention for an NBA title.
Peter, realistically, who are the favourites to take down the Golden State Warriors next year?
The basketball gods for injuries. I'm gonna be honest. The favourites to take down Golden State Warriors next year. I honestly have to put it towards Celtics if they were fully healthy. But no, they're not even in the Eastern or in the Western Conference. Actually, such a.
If there was nods there for LeBron James led team, I think that's the one most people are picking there. Wherever LeBron goes, whether it be the Rockets, the Sixers, the Lakers, or even stays with the Cavs, they're gonna have a pretty good shot.
Yeah, I suppose that's why the Cleveland Cavaliers are there at 30-1, because there is still the off chance that he does stay, and because obviously if they knew he was going, he wouldn't be anywhere near that, or they wouldn't be anywhere near that list. But it's certainly it's going to be interesting to see which of these teams does something. If the bookies are in fact correct, they are a lot of the time. So it's hard to bet against them, but there are a few odds there, especially the 76ers being ahead of the Celtics, that do seem a bit far-fetched. Finally on this episode, we're going to be going back to our draft previews. The draft is just in or around 2.5 weeks away now, and today we're going to be looking at Wendell Carter Jr. He played for Duke.
Duke?
Duke.
Or
he
Duke.
juked him.
Duke. Brad Stevens is Dukes.
Call them whatever you want. But realistically, he looks like he's going to be...
Do fuck up.
No, got it. So this is recording now, so you can just cut this out.
Well, I'm not cutting out the intro, that's for sure.
I'll do it.
Right, so going back to our NBA draft previews, today we're going to talk about Wendell Carter Jr. He played for Duke. Before declaring for the draft, he averaged 13.5 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, just under a steal on only 2 turnovers per game. He is listed as a forward, although we know with a lot of these players they're pretty versatile these days. So I'm going to start with you, Killian. What do you make of Wendell Carter?
Crazy prospect yet again. His numbers don't look great, but you have to consider the fact that he did play alongside Marvin Bagley III in Duke, and we talked already about how much of a monster he is. Averaged 21 and 11 in college, so his numbers aren't going to be slightly lower than they would be if he had his own team like a DeAndre Ayton, but he still had great numbers, like you mentioned, the 13.5 points, 9 rebounds, 2 blocks, great numbers, and he's a very efficient player as well. He shot 56% from the field, 41% from 3 on 1.2 attempts, and a pretty decent 74% from the free throw line. Very good for a kind of center kind of player in Wendell Carter. You don't see them with that good of a free throw shot as well as a three-pointer that early in their careers. He's also a very long player. He's 6'10", not great for center, but he does have a 7'4" wingspan and weighs about 260 pounds, which is, pretty big. That's around DeMarcus Cousins levels of strength. As a player, his main strength, I'd say, is his defense. It's how long he is, how big he is. He's a very good defender. We've seen, he averaged 2 blocks a game for a reason. Absolutely brilliant defender. He's also a great rebounder, 9 rebounds a game, and like I mentioned, when you're averaging 9 rebounds a game beside a 11 rebound per game guy like Marvin Bagley, that's pretty impressive for a guy like Wendell Carter.
Yeah, obviously we've seen this Duke team was kind of a college super team. They didn't really live up to it. They got knocked out by Kentucky, I believe. He seems like he's going to be a good teammate. Obviously he has that potential to be a star, but recently came out that he said his Duke teammates will, quote, show a lot more in the NBA because they weren't really able to show their strengths in Duke, obviously, because there were so many fantastic college prospects there for the year that everyone really couldn't show what they were made of. I think the same kind of goes for Wendell Carter. He had his flashes of excellence, but obviously playing against Marvin Bagley, who's kind of a consensus top 3 pick, people almost overlook this guy, even though he's going to go top 10 without a doubt.
Or at least top 7.
Top 7 even. He has, like with every great prospect though, he does have his weaknesses. One thing is kind of his versatility. Obviously we've seen with so many guys they're kind of versatile, and he will be slightly, but not as much as some of these other guys, like a Marvin Bagley, like a Luka Doncic, that can nearly play everywhere. He's kind of limited to a 4 or a 5 at 6'10", which isn't massive for what these kind of new age power forwards or centers might be. His shot selection isn't great at times. He can settle for shots, not get the shot he really wants. I think that is also because his teammates as well, he wasn't able to do whatever he liked. And his polish, which is kind of a weird thing for people coming out of Duke. We've seen a lot of them coming into the NBA and they're kind of fresh, like we've seen with like Jason Tatum. They kind of know what they're doing straight away. But not really the same for Wendell Carter. He's a bit like Brandon Ingram. When he came out of Duke, he obviously needed a lot of work, and we're only starting to see his real potential now.
So Wendell Carter, as with a few of these players, he's kind of being thrown around to the bottom half of that top 10, anywhere sort of between 6 and 9 Obviously, those picks belonging to Orlando, Chicago, Cleveland via Brooklyn, and New York. So where would you like to see Wendell Carter play next season?
Definitely Chicago. I think that'd be the perfect fit. We talked about him when we were talking about Mo Bamba. We did his kind of draft preview that Chicago need a center. The center would be the absolute perfect pick for them, and there's a plethora of them in the top of this draft. They would obviously prefer Mo Bamba, but Wendell Carter will more than likely fall to 7. I'm sure they'll be happy to take him with how great of a player he is. Slots perfectly beside Lauri Markkanen, as well as the other young good guys they have like Chris Dunn and Zach LaVine to form maybe kind of a bit of a defensive duo there with Chris Dunn. Great perimeter defender. Now you could have a great post defender with Wendell Carter. I think Chicago is definitely the best fit for him.
But God, like 6'10" for a center in the NBA, yeah, that is good.
Markkanen's like 7'1",
and coming into the, like, you almost feel bad for him, like, that much. And also with his weight, he's kind of restricted as well in terms of like his athleticism. Like at this day and age, you have centers like, say, DeMarcus Cousins or that's kind of a bad example to do with athleticism, because as my brother
DeAndre Jordan,
yeah,
prime Dwight Howard.
The prime Dwight Howard. Yeah, if we went back to the prime, we'd be
Clint Capella.
Yeah. Yeah, but like he's really limited with his weight, and at 6'10", he's almost like condensed into a man.
Yeah, I don't.
If you could pick one word to describe Wendell Carter as a prospect, what would you use? Condensed.
Condensed.
Look, I'm not going to be too sympathetic towards someone who's 6'10" and drafted or projected top 10 in the draft, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who'd be happy to be there. But I can understand. Obviously, it's, you know, if you're in the NBA, you want to do the best you can, and you don't want your body to be what limits you. But I suppose, yeah, that's about all for this episode. We'll be back on Saturday. So until next time, of course, thanks to CRC for the studio. If you enjoy our content, like and subscribe on YouTube. Check us out on social media. We are Team Eurostep on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. We are also Team Eurostep on Patreon. So if you enjoy our content, please donate some money. Please. I beg.
Patreon?
So
What do you mean we?
I mean, you have a Patreon.
So until next time, it's going to be a goodbye from Killian, a goodbye from Alex, a goodbye from our special guest Peter,
Hey.
and a
special.
goodbye from me until next.
Yay!